Welcome to The Artist Remains, a channel where we explore creativity, consciousness, authenticity, and human connection in an age increasingly shaped by artificial intelligence. I'm artist and curator P.E. Pinkman. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with abstract artist Sarah Canfield. Sarah's work merges painting and digital photography to create works in multimedia that cross boundaries between photorealism and abstraction. She is also a recipient of a 2022 Fellowship in Painting from the New Jersey State Council on the Arts. Hi, Sarah. I wonder if you could spend a minute and introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, Paul. I appreciate it. So, as you said, I'm an abstract artist, and I've worked with the theme of technology for many years now. It's been a long time. First started working with this theme around kind of more realistic work that I was doing. I started out as sort of a hyper-realist and became attracted to one particular object of this computer power supply. And that became a catalyst for this work that I've been doing over the course of many years. So that theme has been woven throughout my work for quite a while. For a while, I was focusing on still life and how I could kind of intersect realism with abstraction, but using themes of wires and circuit boards and things that kind of alluded to technology. So weaving that together. And gradually, my work has become much more abstract over the years. And now it's become kind of an amalgamation of both realism and abstraction, and then gradually kind of working more towards this idea of how kind of nature and technology sometimes contrast each other, sometimes merge together. And now I sort of, with the introduction of AI, I've been thinking more in terms of how is all of this technology and stuff kind of infiltrating and almost becoming part of our bodies at this point. So that's sort of kind of running in the back of my mind as I've been working, and not necessarily overtly intending, but allowing that to come through.
It's interesting because I don't know if you saw, but most recently, not Elon Musk's company, but another company has developed yet another neural interface for sight that they're testing out on people, where they implant it in people's brains to allow people who heretofore had not been able to see via this sort of digital approach to the world. It isn't necessarily going to be sight in the way that we see, but it will allow them to see spaces and figure their way around and that kind of thing, which sort of touches on what you were just saying, right?
Absolutely. I mean, some of that's really exciting to me. The possibility of that's exciting. And then in other ways, it's terrifying.
Right, exactly. Because it really does go to, it was a TV show, The Bionic Man or Bionic Woman or something,
Remember
right?
that? Yes.
Yeah, it really kind of gets to that point, like
Absolutely.
in the real world, without any of the, Hollywood zhuzhing to make it all so wonderful. It's going to be a very different kind of experience for people, but ultimately could be potentially really great for a lot of people,
Definitely. I think that's one of the best uses. But
yeah. Well, so I think back on the works that I first saw of yours, which were the paintings and prints and things that you had done of these computer parts in ice. And the thing that I found so fascinating about them, and why I guess it goes to this point for me of, is your work abstract? Is your work representational? Even at that time, and I think largely it may have been the ice aspect of it, it rode the line between the two. When you were working on those, were you thinking about it from the perspective of abstraction or from photorealism, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, it was very much a part of my transition, those pieces. And it was a very concerted effort at that point to take the realistic work that I was doing and make it abstract. Like, I very much was trying to take my images and break them apart and make something else with it, but still stay within the kind of confines or within my own visual language that I had created already of this very realistic work. But so taking these kind of images, taking these technological objects and then purposely breaking it apart and seeing what would happen if I created a sense of refraction and fragmentation, and then this kind of fluidity and all of that. So it was very intentional, actually, at that point. And then
very successful, I might add.
Thank you. Yeah.
When you were doing it, I wonder, because thinking when you think of electric, you think of flow, right? And that was another aspect or layer to those pieces that I found so compelling. Was one of the things you always learn if you ever have touched an outlet as a kid or had anything to do with electric is never put electric and water together, right? And yet here you are putting electric, and you're like on so many levels, you're talking about flow, right? You're talking about the flow of the electric components and the flow of the water. You're talking about this really, energetic dissonance there that these two things are not supposed to go together. And were you including those things, or those are sort of byproducts of how you approached it?
I think actually I had never thought about that until retrospect, and somebody else may have pointed it out to me. But I love that. Actually, I love that because
Yeah.
then there's sort of this impending danger in the pieces, and impending like, oh, those things shouldn't go together, and why are they together, and what might happen, and is there something bad that might occur? So I do like that sense of kind of foreboding, maybe that's there, or that there are two things that shouldn't be together. Yeah, it's sort of that organic and the electric happening at the same time.
Right,
And
right.
yet, actually, there are electrical currents that run through our body naturally too. So that's interesting as well. So
Right.
they're
It's
not
we just haven't
unrelated.
figured out how to do that very well. Our body has, but our technology is still working on some of these things.
Definitely, definitely.
So I think that's a good jumping off point to talk about, to introduce the whole AI conversation. You mentioned it earlier. And I was thinking, so given all of your work, which I'm familiar with up to, a couple of years ago for sure, it seems like in some ways your work sort of prescient about what's coming, because it's talking about human connections underneath the surface of technological connections. So can you talk about to what extent artificial intelligence is part of your process now, or what you're thinking about it and how you see that? Because for a lot of artists, you mentioned this word danger before, right?
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of artists, all they see are red flags. So it's going to take over my life.
Yeah. There's a lot to think about. I think in a lot of different perspectives. I try to see myself as an observer of what's happening and position myself as an artist as kind of neutral in a certain way, looking at things. But I very much acknowledge that I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert on this stuff. I'm sort of looking at the effects of it and feeling the effects of it as an artist. But I guess I see all sides of it. I see the positives in what can happen. There's a lot of ways we could use AI that can be like an artist assistant to us, and I don't see anything wrong with that inherently, but I do see concerns. I mean, there is an element of a flattening that's happening where all this information is getting amalgamated and accumulated, and there's sort of this sort of sameness to information that's coming across to us.
Yeah, it's
So
true.
there's sort of, and that could happen eventually in the art world too, that we're all circulating the same ideas and things are getting aggregating in a similar way. So anyway, I see all these different sides to it, I suppose. And I want to follow it and allow myself to have multiple reactions to it. I think that's where it becomes very interesting to me. If I had a conclusion, I wouldn't be interested in exploring it so much.
Do you use it at all in your life currently that you're aware of, or intentionally, not necessarily for your
Yeah.
artwork, but just as a general concept?
A little bit, a little bit here and there, and a little bit more as it's sort of infiltrated my life, not necessarily picking it out, but it is quite useful in helping with writing, that kind of stuff. Yeah, so just kind of in searches and things like that, it has been useful to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't used it to create images at this point. I mean, I wouldn't rule that out forever for me for the future, but at this point, I haven't felt the need to do that. So I haven't used it in that way. Let me think, how else? Well, I mean, Photoshop actually, so
Right.
I'm not,
There's a really good example.
yeah, I
Right.
mean, yeah, I mean, it's almost hard to draw a line too of where, okay, the computer has been helping me for quite some time now.
Yeah.
Technology has been helping me for quite some time. So it's hard to even draw a line and say oh, well, pre-AI, post-AI. Well, there's sort of this continuum of how I've been using it. So for instance, I've always in my photorealistic work, I always used photography. I am not somebody who's ashamed to say, like, I will use a projection to get an initial drawing. Like, there's technological use in my work throughout, ever since I've been working, really. And
Right.
then Photoshop has taken it to another level. So, like, I don't have a problem using Photoshop. The ways that it integrates layers is amazing. And it does things that I would never come up with on my own. So, in that way, I see it as a collaborator. I can do more with it than I could without it. But I'm also not using it in a passive way. I'm using it in a very conscious way. So I might throw information like into Photoshop and then I see what it does and I'm selecting and making a choice as to what I want. So there's a very big difference between just generating images from an AI without thinking about it. It's with intention and with me as the artist being involved. So there's so many ways to use it. And I think for me, I found Photoshop great. I actually love it. I find it extremely freeing and interesting and fun. And I only know a very, very small fraction of this
Right.
program that I use all the time. So yeah, I
Yeah, it's
almost don't want to know too much about it. So
I think it's better sometimes. And that's what's so interesting, why I'm really pleased you were able to come on this show, because your work talks to technology in so many different ways, but it also talks to humanness, right? And I think that it sort of puts you in a particularly valuable place because you're embracing technology within your work in so many different ways that a lot of artists have rejected outright, right? There's this sort of perspective in the art world, well, it's not original, right? Whatever that even
mm,
means. It's not coming directly from me. But I think your work, shows that that really isn't the case. And I kind of feel like that's where we need to be headed as far as artists relating to artificial intelligence, which is looking at it as another tool like brushes and pencils and all of these things to accomplish something that's authentic to us. And I wonder, have you thought about that? Like, when you look at your own work and you create that work and then you see it after you've done, do you find it something that you can identify as a person? Meaning human, what is the human connection that you see in those pieces?
mm. Oh yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, definitely, definitely there's a human connection. If there wasn't, then there would be no reason for myself to be here as a fine artist, you know? I think it's
Right.
a lot of it for me is like the pushing and pulling of materials. You know, when it comes down to it, I'm generating some imagery with the help of Photoshop sometimes. But when it comes down to it, I'm taking that imagery and then putting it into a material physical form that has substance, that has a texture, thickness, or certain properties. I'm like when I work with soft pastel, for instance, I'm all the time mushing it in with my fingers and like getting in there. There's a tactile experience that you could never replace with, AI could not do that for me.
Right.
Maybe some robotic stuff could eventually, but not in the same way. So there's a definite like tactile experience. There's a consciousness to making art that you're, especially coming from kind of photorealism. Like I believe very much in observation, the power of observation, and the AI is not human. It doesn't have conscious awareness. So
Not that we
it's
know of.
there, right? And maybe that's coming. That's the frightening thing.
Right.
That
There
is
you
the
go.
frightening thing. So, maybe that's coming, but it's not here yet. So the ability like to discern and to make decisions and to make decisions over time. Like a lot of my work has quite a lot of layering in it. So I may take an image and pull it apart and abstract it and put filters on it and tear it up, tear it apart and all of that. I may do that one day, and then 3 weeks down the line, I can take that same stuff and do other things to it and put it back together and shuffle it around again. And there's something about there's a beautiful part of that long-term process that can't happen if you just push a button and make an image and it's a slick kind of object, or a flat object on a screen. There's something really different about that kind of long term, like really working on something. There's something almost sacred about an art object, I think. Like it's embedded with everything that we've done to it and all the care and work and consideration and thought and emotion. There's something very kind of sacred and special about that. So
I think it's an interesting question because this statement is really accurate. There is something sacred about it. It's something deeply personal and touches people on a much more internal level than even a lot of people will admit to. What's interesting to me is this idea that there are so many people today who want to sort of co-opt what it feels like to be an artist, right? And or co-opt the attention and excitement that they see artists getting. So you have what I perceive to be an awful lot of not particularly talented people running around trying to create art not because they care so much about the art, but because they want all of these other trappings that go along with it, right? You then create artificial intelligence, which allows people to quote unquote create things, but they're not actually making it in the way you're talking about it, right? They're using a system to output something so they get to call themselves artists, but they're not really generating something original to themselves.
Yeah.
I have a statement from you that I wanted to read from your
Okay.
website, which I think goes to this so much. It says, I am interested in creating visual contradictions similar to the unsettling, hyper-real experience of a vivid dream. The fusion of natural and artificial images in my work echoes the intrusion of technology into the ever-fading natural world. Well, this is like right here, right? Because if you just take that, 2 steps further, you introduce artificial intelligence, you're now really getting into the intrusion into the ever-fading natural world. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think that I wrote a lot of that pre-AI, or my experience of using AI, actually. Yeah.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah, I could see the coming intrusion. You could feel it coming, and even without the name artificial intelligence, we just know that it's gonna keep developing over time.
Right.
Yeah, so you can feel that.
So, so in some ways, your work, again, as I said earlier, it's sort of prescient of this, right? There's this, you underneath all of that is this idea of this duality between technology and the human condition, right? It both represents in some ways the humanness of relationships. At the same time, it sort of points out that there is a path there that can ultimately push us out of it, right? Does that make sense?
Right. It's a really a slippery slope. There is a slippery
Right.
slope there. Yeah. Yeah, where there's sort of this entrance of it, and there's kind of this omnipresence of technology that is
Right.
sometimes it feels like a friendly companion.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes well, I speak for myself. Sometimes I want it out of my life, you know?
Yeah.
We can't turn it off in a lot of ways, and we don't even know when it's there, when it's not there. I was just recently reading something when I was like on Instagram about, shut off, like here's the settings to shut off if you don't want your reels to be used in Meta AI.
Right.
And I thought, oh my gosh, like, let me figure out how this works. So there's times when it's just infiltrated already. And then in hindsight, you say, oh my goodness, it's been here before I knew it was here.
Right.
And
I think
that's
this is
unsettling.
key. Right. And this is the funny thing for me is where, I'm focused here on artificial intelligence, but the effects that so many people are afraid of with AI are actually already here and have been for a long time with the systems that are already in place.
Absolutely.
The websites and all of the cameras that are everywhere, even social media itself, for all of its apparent benefits, it has a tremendous amount of intrusion into our lives by the amount of recording that it's doing of who we are and tracking everything about us, what we buy and how we live. And people have just come to accept that by and large, but we don't yet know the damage that can be done to us by it.
Absolutely. I think that one of the things I worry the most about in terms of AI is the effect on kids and education and how people are
Right.
learning, because we don't know the neuroscience on that yet. There hasn't been enough time to study that, but the effect on the brain and the
Right.
effect on how people are learning, all of that's really concerning. to think about how much the intrusion is there and how fragmented our thinking is now. I mean, for myself, I never used to have trouble focusing, and I find myself having trouble focusing sometimes. It's, my attention span has definitely decreased over time. And I like to think of myself as somebody who can think critically and who can say no to things, but it's very difficult. It's very difficult, because we're keeping up. Excuse me, we're keeping up with everybody else, trying to keep up with your texts and the phone and the emails and the this and the that, and everything's in real time, and things are moving so fast. Things are moving really fast.
I would say this is maybe one of the things that makes the whole process so scary, is that it's all very quick. I mean, in the history of humanity, in the history of art, what's happened to art in the last 100 years is probably more, maybe 150 years, developmentally, technologically, faster, bigger, more impactful than everything that happened in the prior 1,000 years. The use of all of these components has made a big, big impact, both on the art that people are creating, but on how and why we choose to make what we do.
Absolutely. There's such a huge change, yeah, over time.
Right. So you've migrated over time in your work from these earlier, more photorealist pieces using technological elements. Can you talk about where you've taken it more recently, and just describe what's happening in your work now?
Yeah, I mean, so definitely I've been moving more in an abstract direction. So I had this very kind of slow trajectory where I moved myself out of the realism and into the abstraction, but I still very much use the photography as a way to kind of insert these elements of clarity and these elements of kind of arresting the viewer a little bit and a suggestion of something that's real. So like
Mm-hmm.
creating that like dream-like kind of feeling where in a dream, sometimes it feels like things are absolutely convincing, but yet they're not at the same time. So I like that
Right.
feeling of it's real, but it's not real. And that's something I've really been working with throughout my work, like since the beginning. So now I'm looking at it in an abstract way. So the hyper real is almost still there, but it's looking at that in a different way. Kind of. So I do a lot of mixing and remixing, taking my images and breaking them up. There was a time that I was printing out images and putting bleach on them to kind of tear away at the printed layers of the image, scanning
Interesting.
that and putting it back into some of my digital collages. So I do a lot of digital collaging now, and I keep reusing some of my own images over and over. So there's sort of these reflections and refractions in a way of different things that I've made before.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of like I take things and I'm putting them through a filter, or putting them through another machine, like sort of putting them through myself over and over again, and then
Right.
reamalgamating them together. So, but there's definitely an important aspect of having these elements of like clarity in the images that I make, a photographic kind of reference that makes it feel like something is actually there. So that there's sort of a presence there. Yeah.
Interesting. I know for a while you were using or creating work that was sort of emerging off of the canvas and out of the space of the plane of the substrate. Are you still doing that? Have you moved away from that to something more contained at this point?
Yeah, kind of. I've moved away from that. That was a lot of fun for a while, and that kind of led me into exploring three dimensions and sort of the more immersive feeling, creating an immersive feeling in the images. But yeah, I've kind of moved away from that a little bit. I think I've had more desire in the last couple of years to really be in there and feel the tactile qualities of the work. Like the more
Right.
time I spend on a screen, which I actually do love the screen too. I have to say.
I do as
The
well. Yeah.
Yeah, so as much as I love that and I'm using it, I also like feel this counterbalance. Like I need to be working with materials. Like I like the feeling of when I'm working with pastel, for instance, like that feeling of the tactile quality of the pastel touching the paper and the sound
The
that it makes and
surfaces.
the friction, so I'm feeling as though like my materials I don't need to be as focused on making things complicated, all the time. Sometimes I do in terms of the output, but other times I don't. So yeah, it just kind of fluctuates. So I might you never know. I might come back to the kind of layered three-dimensional stuff again. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you see where do you see this going? I mean, what do you see? What do you have planned for your work for the future? Thinking about that?
Well, I'm always exploring new imagery and new ideas. I think I'm more and more focused on there being less recognizable kind of stuff in my
Uh-huh.
images and sort of letting it go a little bit more, and just seeing where that takes me. I try to not plan it so much and see where the work itself will take me to the next place where it needs to go, type of thing.
Right. Yeah.
And interestingly too, I've been a last piece that I've been working on in the studio and kind of finishing up right now is black and white. And that's really different for me to take color out of the equation, and that's really
Wow, that
challenging.
should be
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm playing with that, sort of letting that happen, when it feels like black and white has a lot of potential. I feel like they're taking away the color focuses more on maybe the story of this particular image or the feeling of
Mhm.
it. So I'm enjoying that, to take away something that has been so integral in my work for a long time. So
Good.
we'll see if that continues or not. I don't know.
Any shows coming up? Any places that you're gonna be, having your work where people can see it live?
Well, right now I'm in more of a production phase, so really kind of
Mhm.
working on some new work and new ideas and new imagery, that kind of stuff. So at the moment, not yet, but definitely I'm sure there will be coming up. I'm always happy to have people over to the studio and talk about the work and see it in person and to chat. So yeah, I'm in that phase at the moment.
Will you be
Yeah.
doing another open studio at manufacturers before you move, or you don't think so? Or do you even
Huh?
know? Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. It's a wild card. Yeah, it's possible, but I would imagine probably not because we'll be in the midst of our transition coming up.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I know from firsthand experience, it's a
Mm.
lot of work.
Yes.
Good luck with that. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. This has been a great conversation. And as I expected, very interesting insights into both how you work and how you use technology. Like I said, so many artists either hide the fact that they use technology or they are afraid of it. And you're neither. You are out there with it. And I think that's a really good place to be right now as we move into sort of an unknown future.
Yeah, yeah. That's been a really interesting conversation. I think it's a really important topics to talk about. So I really, really appreciate this. It's a fun
Sure.
conversation, Paul.
It's good. Nice
Yeah.
to see you as always. And we'll catch up again soon.
Okay.